We will speak about Fossati brothers from Morcote to Istanbul. And the first presentation is from Lucia Pedrini Stanga. She unfortunately is not able to be with us today, but let me read her CV. She is an art historian and carries out independent research, particularly in the field of artistic emigration. She has curated an exhibition and published several essays on Gaspare Fossati. Her presentation will be read by Matteo Capelletti. I would like to invite him to the stage and thank him for coming from Ticino all the way to here. And I should also mention that he is a relative of Fossati family, so we are honored with your presence. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you very much for everything. I try to read something not read by me, so I think to put some emotion inside to be more cool. But I want to take 5 seconds to say thank you to everybody because it was a pleasure from the bottom of my heart to be here. And what was created by an idea of a crazy man, my grandfather, it started with a joke. Maybe you go. Several times ago, I went to Istanbul, and they say, go to Hagia Sophia, right, Fossati. Go, please take a photo. And now we are here in Russia embassy with Swiss, Turkey. Thank you very much from him, from me, and from my Alessandro, my cousin, and from my grandfather, Paolo Poma. Was a pleasure to be here. So I read. Thank you. I try to match photos and text. Please. Gaspare Fossati is an architect, a painter, a restorer, but above all, a great traveler. A cosmopolitan travel, but deeply rooted in his homeland. His home is Morcote, a cluster of houses suspended between the lake and the mountains, in the southern end of the territory of what is now the Canton of Ticino. Like the entire Prealpine Lakes region, is a land of migrants. Gaspare began travel during his childhood when in 1816, at the age of 7, he traveled with his family to Venice, where his father, Ambrogio, worked like a building constructor. 7 years later, the family returned to Morcote, and Gaspare left to Milan to study architecture at the Brera Academy, which compared to the Venetian one, offered a more up-to-date and cosmopolitan international recognized education. After this, Fossati no longer returned to Venice, a sort of second homeland for him, except for a short stay. Venice is not only linked to the small circle of family affection, but also to the network of friendship and relation he formed in that period and maintained through his career. 2 names stand out above all, Pietro Paoletti and Giovanni Battista Cecchini, both painters and pupils of Giuseppe Borsato at the Venice Academy. But if Venice had an influence on Fossati's professional career, Rome was a decisive stage. Fossati arrived there in 1827 on the recommendation of Professor Carlo Amati and supported by the Lugano architect Pietro Bianchi. And thanks to Pietro Bianchi's friendship, he was able to enter to erudite and cosmopolitan environment of the city and establish high-level contracts, for example, with the architect Giuseppe Valadier and the painter Vincenzo Camuccini and the abbot Angelo Ugeri. With the trip to Italy, Fossati's training process was complete. At the end of 1832, he returned to Morcote and then left for St. Petersburg. And thanks to experience gained in Brera and Italy, and the Ticinese worker who had immigrated to Russia, such as the Ruska family, Fossati was able to access important office and mayor contracts. In 1837, he left the position of official architect of the Tsarist court to go to Constantinople to be a new Russian embassy. This was, I think, painting of Fossati. Fossati returned in Morcote in 1858. Only a few pieces remain of the Turkish salon in Morcote. Careful set up in this new home. Carpet, fireplace, mirror, oriental inscription complete this decor, which was bring to Fossati back to the shore of Lugano Lake, to those of Bosphorus. This is what Lucia Pedrini's Stanga wrote. I read for her, but I'm done. I'm an egocentric man, but it's not my place, so thank you very much for everything, and thank you. Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry, but thank you.
It was short, but very valuable. Thank you. It will open up many questions for our discussions. Now I'd like to move to our second speaker, Daniela Mondini. She will be speaking about Gaspare Fossati's Rome experience this time. We are moving to Rome. And if I read Daniela's background, she's a full professor at the Accademia di Architettura, Università della Svizzera, Italiana. Her interests include early Christian and medieval art and architecture with a particular focus on the city of Rome. So thank you, Daniela.
Thank you, everybody, for this wonderful event we have here, and well, I'm really excited. Gaspare Fossati, Rome's experience. In my contribution, I will focus on the second phase of Gaspare Fossati training as an architect by studying, especially by drawing, ancient buildings. The young architect arrived in Rome in fall 1827 to perfect himself in the study of ancient architecture, after having finished with honors his studies at the Brera Academy in Milan. His 5-year stay in Rome, interrupted by some trips to the surroundings and to southern Italy, you have seen some sketches in the presentation before, has attracted the attention of several scholars. Ugo Donati published in 1958 a nearly complete selection of the Roman vedute lithographed by Fossati, assembling them with the preliminary drawings kept in the state archives in Bellinzona. Lucia Pedrini Stanga dedicated several excellent studies, as we have seen, it was a little bit short, to Gaspare as a traveler in Italy. She published his Carnet de Voyage from his trip to Campania and gave special attention to Fossati's artistic acquaintances during his stay in Rome. He met there the etchers Luigi Rossini, Antonio Acquaroni, and through the mediation of the Luganese architect Pietro Bianchi, he was introduced to the leading architect in Rome, Giuseppe Valadier, head of the Council of Public Building in the city. No? Next one. It comes, okay. In his sketchbook, Gaspare Fossati recorded the buildings he visited. More canonical vedute, like the one of Santa Costanza, and the ruins of the early Christian Basilica of Sant'Agnese on the Via Nomentana, alternate with zoom-like views of some single architectural details intended for better comprehension of the building's structural or stylistic elements. Oops. That's why. In this slide, you see the preparatory sketch, the lithographed definitive vedute, and the detail from the sketchbook. You see also how the monument looks like today, after his liberation from medieval and later structures. The main focus of interest of Gaspare Fossati during his Roman stay was the Forum Romanum. He captured it in several sketches, which were in part later elaborated to lithographed view, in this case, the Septimus Severus arch. But he also took many measurements of the building and of its profiles, which wouldn't have been necessary for a drawing of a veduta. It's evident that the architect here was interested in recording the exact proportions of the classical building, maybe also for later use in his own activity as a neoclassical designer. On the verso side of this sheet, we find a list written by Gaspare with 70 buildings, of which drawing vedute were planned or were already done. I wrote it also down. For most of them, the drawings and lithographed works have been identified. Since the beginning of the 19th century, with the Napoleonic occupation, there were several projects to excavate the Forum Romanum and to bring it to one level. Solutions had to be found in order to reconcile the level of modern Rome and its road system with the street level of the ancient city, which the excavators were determined to reach. Under the supervision of Valadier, the area below the tabularium had been excavated, as documented and lithographed by Fossati. In this context, Fossati sent to his former teacher at Brera, the architect Carlo Amati, the restored ground plan of the Temple of Jupiter Stator, of which only 3 columns were still standing. You see a little arrow in the veduta. The plan was published by Amati in his translation of Vitruvius. Parts of the Via Sacra especially had to be excavated to the original street level. Beginning in 1817, under the supervision of Raffaele Stern, from whom Giuseppe Valadier took over in 1820, the Arch of Titus and the Colosseum were restored. It is not at all surprising that these 2 buildings, with their restoration à l'avant-garde, caught the attention of the young architect, as Lucia Pedrini Stanga already addressed. It was determined that the Arch of Titus had to be freed of its medieval and later addition. For static reason, in order to consolidate the structure, Valadier, following the project of Stern, had to supplement the original parts that survived. He restored, at least in the main lines, the piers of the arch to their original structure, maintaining their proportion and using travertine as a less expensive material than marble. In addition, the design of the added parts was executed in a less detailed way than in the original preserved elements. Gaspare Fossati dedicated a separate detailed drawing to the original central part of the arch with its sculpted decoration. You see it on the top on the left. So it's a little bit difficult to see, but you see the arrow. It's important. In a second watercolor showing the complete restored arch, at the left of the sheet, Fossati cropped and zoomed a detail of one of the new, less refined capitals with its shaft left uncarved, in distinction to the 2 fluted original ones. This shows, as Pedrini Stanga correctly noticed, the equal attention of the young architect paid to the new interventions as well as to the original ancient structure. In many drawings of the Colosseum made by Gaspare Fossati, the point of view was taken from the western side, so that the intervention by Valadier was particularly accentuated. Here we see the so-called sperone, the huge added buttress on an intervention called Restauro di Sostegno as a construction that repeated the design of the three orders of arcades of the Colosseum in brick, with only the bases and capitals made in travertine. Again, in this case, it is possible to distinguish clearly the new parts from the original ancient ones. This approach, which was perhaps motivated more economically than conceptually, was appreciated by contemporary antiquarians and subsequently celebrated as a precursor of today's restoration practice in its distinction of new interventions from the ancient structure by their materials. We would like to know who are the reckless people shown on the edge of the second order of arcades. Could it be that Fossati made a portrait of himself, maybe in company of Giuseppe Valadier and Pietro Bianchi? We don't know. But the group of three male silhouettes wearing top hats to catch the eye are there to catch the eye and the point of interest. How precise Fossati's drawing was, and also in its distinction of old from new parts, can be seen when we compare his veduta with the contemporary photograph. The eastern buttress, built in the first decade of the century by Raffaele Stern, a less elegant solution which plugged the two collapsing arcades at the eastern end of the external ring of the Colosseum with brick walls, seems not to have attracted as much of the young architect's attention. No general view of Fossati shows this intervention. On the slide, you see a view by Uggieri taken at the beginning of the consolidation works. And you see some wood pieces inside the arcades. But on one sheet, with several sketches and visual annotations of the Colosseum's architectural details, we also find the inner part of the second floor gallery with Raffaele Stern's brickwork consolidation of one of the two arcades. The annotation reads, Sperone, secondo piano, costruzione degli archi. So he was really interested in the restoration of the Colosseum. In his time at the Brera Academy, the young Gaspare may have been acquainted with the name of Abbé Angelo Uggieri, the architect and antiquarian who, between 1800 and 1834, published a series of 30 volumes with plans and vedute of ancient and decadent monuments of Rome, Journée pittoresque des édifices de Rome ancienne, published in French and Italian and addressed to a wider audience, including grand touristes, les amateurs des arts, scholars of antiquity, and professors of architecture. These volumes helped to establish Uggieri as an authority in archaeological matters in Rome. In the slide, you see that in continuation of his Journée pittoresque, Uggieri subsequently dedicated himself to the buildings of the décadence, that is, late antique and early Christian architecture, for example, about the Basilica of St. Paul's outside the walls, the early Christian basilica. After the disastrous fire of the night of the 15th of July of 1823, Uggieri was appointed by the Pope Leo XII to supervise the restoration and reconstruction of the heavily damaged early Christian Basilica of St. Paul's outside the walls. Against Valadier, who, after a first shock, soon proposed to design a completely new building, and in accordance with the prescription of the Pope in his chirographo of September 1825, Uggieri aimed to preserve and repristinate the original basilica as far as possible with the emendation of the decadent part in a neoclassical style. For instance, he indicated that the arcades of the central nave should be replaced by more classical architraves. In the following years, Ugeri's repristination project suffered major setbacks. Unfortunately, from a medievalist perspective, for static reasons, the Commission of Architects of the Accademia di San Luca did not approve the conservation of the old triumphal arch with its mosaic from the time of Galla Placidia. So this is the triumphal arch with this important mosaic. Okay. So sometime in spring 1829, the triumphal arch was demolished and the reconstruction was ongoing when Gaspare Fossati happened to be invited, probably by Ugeri himself or by the architect Pietro Bosio, to witness the raising of the second giant granite column of the triumphal arch of this, on the 6th of August 1829. Fossati's drawing documents that most of the columns and arcades of the central nave that had survived the fire had been removed, and the new triumphal arch was in part already rebuilt, supported by lateral piers with one column on the right already in place. Already here. Gaspare Fossati seems to have been more attracted by the amusing situation of portraying the architect Boğaziçi like a concert director or deus ex machina, conducting the works without the help of any manpower, than by recording the technical details of the lifting devices. Ugeri, with his big hat, can be identified in the foreground of the left. The performance, which lasted 3 hours, also attracted a larger audience. You see it in the, In the veduta of the transept of the basilica, some days after the fire made by the etcher Antonio Acquaroni, we can see the Ionic capital of the triumphal arch still in its original location against the pier at the end of the nave. I mean this one. In his project, Ugeri planned to preserve the triumphal arch and its Ionic capital. Probably it was Ugeri himself who gave the print of the Ionic capital for the triumphal arch as a gift to Gaspare. This rare engraving presented to the Commission in June 1827 and published in July belonged to Ugeri's project for the restoration of the arch and then the replacement of the huge capitals of the 5th century. It is the only other visual document of the Basilica of San Paolo we were able to find in the Fossati archives. Ugeri's repristination project for the transept of the Basilica envisioned the conservation of the exterior late antique walls and the apse, but the demolition of the large medieval wall, the Muro di Sidorio, this one. This was a huge construction of the 12th century with arcades resting on big ancient Corinthian capitals with the second triumphal arch, which divided the transept in two aisles. Ugeri's goal was to regain the pure spatial effect of the late antique transept. His design also envisioned placing the surviving pavonazzetto columns of the nave of old St. Paul's along the walls of the transept of Aspolia. A neoclassical entablature with resorts would tie them to the perimeter walls of the transept. Oops, no. In his treatise of 1830 on the Basilica Ulpia, which had been recently excavated in the Forum Traianum, Ugeri published a visual reconstruction of how the temple of the Basilica would have looked. Despite the barrel vault and the different orientation of the building, the similarity to his St. Paul's project in the articulation of the walls with freestanding fluted columns carrying an entablature with ressorts is striking. The similarity reflects Ugeri's basic assumption that the Basilica Ulpia had provided the model for the huge Basilica of St. Paul's, built by the three emperors, Theodosius, Gratian, and Valentinian, around the turn of the 5th century. I have lost one image, okay. This is amazing, because, okay. During his stay in Rome, Gaspare Fossati was well aware of the ongoing debate about how to restore St. Paul's and about the remodeling of the damaged early Christian basilica into a neoclassical and finally almost a new building. I would not exclude the possibility that 1 decade later, some reminiscences of this debate, especially concerning the triumphal arch of St. Paul's, emerged in Fossati's design process for the nave of St. Peter in Galata. It's just a slight hint, but the threefold repetition of the transversal arches resting on freestanding columns with Corinthian capitals might be a reminiscence from Fossati's Rome experience. Also, the new building of St. Peter and Paul for Dominicans of Istanbul can be seen as a classical Christian temple, quoting the words of Richard Krautheimer for characterizing the 19th century new St. Paul's outside the walls in Rome. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. We will now move to our third speaker, Mert Pekdoğdu. He will be speaking about Fossati in the Ottoman archives. Mert Pekdoğdu obtained his Bachelor of Arts in History from Boğaziçi University and a master's degree from the University of Venice. Currently, he is a graduate student of the history at Boğaziçi University. He works on Italian migration in Mediterranean and translates Domenica Sestini's Istanbul letters for a Turkish edition. So, Mert, please.
Is it fine? Yeah, okay. Distinguished guests and dear grandchildren of Gaspare Fossati, being the most distinguished ones here. We have insightful talks about the life and career and major works of Gaspare Fossati today. So my talk will be complementary to them in that it will unpack the personal investments, and it'll attempt to place Gaspare Fossati in the broader architectural and diplomatic milieu, realm of Pera. So it's time to bring Gaspare Fossati to Istanbul after our adventures in Russia and Rome. So Gaspare Fossati was the chief court architect of the Russian Empire, right? And in 1837, he was commissioned the very building that we are in now, and then came here. And through the 1840s, he apparently attracted the attention of the Ottoman state and was given the construction tasks of a couple of buildings, as well as the well-known Hagia Sophia restoration in 1847. So Darül Fünun is the one stated at the bottom that he started working on in 1845 is the massive Ottoman University building right next to Hagia Sophia, right? But this very building was not the only ambitious and great project, embassy project in 1830s and 1840s, let's say. Across Grand Rue, the British Empire planned and executed its embassy building that still stands right near the Galatasaray High School. And that building, that embassy, brought another European architect to this city, William James Simmet. So the William J. Smith, unlike Gaspare Fossati, is not well known before his arrival in this city. He was just an ordinary, if you will, architect in the Royal Office of Works in London, and we don't know much about his background, education, and etc. And he did not plan the British Embassy, by the way. So the embassy building was planned and works started by Charles Barry, another Sir Charles Barry. He came here to complete the embassy building, the British Embassy building. And just like Gaspare Fossati, he is given a couple of tasks, architectural and construction tasks by the Ottoman Empire. Taşkışla, I'm gonna show that to you very soon. The Istanbul Technical present-day Istanbul Technical University Taşkışla campus, but back then Mecidiye barracks were maybe the major one among all. So we are in the Tanzimat Istanbul, right? The age of reforms in the 1840s. We have two architects, Gaspare Fossati on the one hand and the William Smith on the other hand. There are two ambitious embassy projects. There is the Holland embassy as well, being constructed in the very same years. And both architects work for the Ottoman state as well. So they built the Tanzimat Istanbul, if you will, together, along with the Balyan family, the Ottoman chief court architects. So the question of this presentation is, what are the ways in which Fossati and Smith interacted, directly or indirectly, were juxtaposed to one another, right? And yeah, lived through together in the 1840s. So I'm gonna explore this through some personal contacts and investments of the both sides, the Fossatis and the Gaspare Fossati and William Smith. So in 1847, Gaspare Fossati was quite a prestigious person, was given the task of the restoration of Hagia Sophia, despite various objections by some clerics, right? Because if you think about it, one of the most prestigious monuments in the entire Islamic realm is handed to a Christian European architect from the point of view of some conservative circles, and he wants to, at that period, he wants to purchase a house near the crossroads, what the Ottomans called as the crossroads. So you see on the horizontal line, you see the Grand Rue de Pera, right? And we are here, the Palais Russe, at the bottom. And on the vertical line, you see the Asmalı Mescid Street and Kumbaracı. This one? Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you, Hocam. Oh, yeah. So this is called the so-called crossroads. On the horizontal line, we have the Grand Rue de Pera, and on the vertical line, Asmalı Mescid Street and Kumbaracı Yokuşu. And we are here. What are the? By the way, I should mention that back in 1847, house property ownership, let's say, for non-Ottoman people, for foreigners, was not allowed. It became possible only in 1867. So a non-Ottoman subject person could not purchase a property unless a special permission is obtained. So the Gaspare Fossati reaches to the Grand Vizier, Mustafa Reşit Pasha, to get that special permit. And here is Mustafa Reşit Pasha's kind of handing out the request to the Sultan, right? So he says, even though the houses in question seem to be sold by Muslims, reputable people, like Gaspare Fossati, are sometimes permitted to purchase property, my dear Sultan. Moreover, the houses are located at a place where property is gradually passed into Christian hands and became uninhabitable for Muslims who are now forced to rent their remaining houses to Christians and live somewhere else. He's talking about the very area that Gaspare Fossati wants to purchase his house. So this is a contemporary map, the Imperial Engineering School map from 1845. And the code color represents the confessional distribution in Pera. So the pink lines, the pink areas, correspond to Muslim kind of neighborhoods, and the blue ones, right, correspond to Christian and Jewish, non-Muslim, let's say, areas. And I underlined a place with the yellow. Let me show. Yeah, okay. With a yellow drawing, let's say, and there was a mosque. So very unlikely, a mosque is entirely surrounded in the year 1845 by Christian inhabitations, let's say, and then there's the this area is the cemetery, Petit Champ. So what does the and by the way, let me add this. This mosque disappears in the next 10, 15 years. So in another document in 1860, it entirely disappeared, right? So there's a big transformation, if you will, in this area. We are here, right? And in this area, there's a big transformation. In the years, it gets Christianized, if you will. And apparently, the Sultan is concerned about that. And he replies, even in case the houses in question were not to be sold by Muslims, in a hypothetical scenario, let's say, the fact that Fossati is not an imperial subject, is not our imperial subject, renders such a transaction illegal. Moreover, permission for the purchase has the inconvenient potential for the spreads, siraya, the spread of such a practice. So Fossati is not given the special permission, and the reason is probably, very probably, the very location and the Ottoman concerns for the further Christianization of the, let's say, the area around the mosque and the old Muslim quarter of the upper Pera, let's say. What if William Smith wants to make a similar purchase in the city 3 years and 2 months later, in early 1851? Any guess? Anyway, so he is given, very interestingly, he's given the right to purchase a house, and he is given a total sum of 200,000 kurush, piasters, as an imperial gift from the Sultan for the purchase. And just to make sense of that amount, we can make a little comparison. So this is the Mecidiye barracks built by William Smith in those years, right? And present-day Istanbul Technical University Taşkışla faculty. And the annual salary of William Smith, the monthly salary of William Smith for this very building was 4,000 kurush. So he's given four times his annual salary as a gift. The question is, what does it mean? Does it mean that William Smith was the favorite architect of the Ottomans, or does it mean that he was favored a lot more, like the Ottomans favored him or liked his architectural works and style, whatever, more than they did that of Gaspare Fossati? My answer is that things are a lot more complicated. And for that, we need to go back to the year 1846. You see here the Ottoman orders, decorations, orders, given to foreigners, Secretary of Foreign States and people of foreign states, right? So in early 1846, Gaspare Fossati requests an imperial order from the Sultan. He makes a request through the Russian ambassador Titov. Okay? And the Grand Vizier again hands the request to the Sultan and tells him, like, at the beginning, well, we were not that willing, because probably for the financial reasons. But then we thought, with the top administrators, we thought that he served us a lot and he might be hurt. Gaspare Fossati might be hurt. So, my dear Sultan, it makes a lot of sense to hand Gaspare Fossati, to give Gaspare Fossati an imperial order. And he is given, this point is very important, he is given the 5th order. You see, 1, 2, 3, and then this is the 5th order, and Gaspare Fossati is given this. 1 month later, William James Smith makes the same request through the British ambassador, Stratford Canning. He demands an order as well, just because he designed a rejected, disliked hospital 1 year ago. The Ottomans are not favorable to the request again, but then they accept it and they give they gift the British architect, William Smith, the 6th order. So comparison is the thief of joy. This is a very nice English proverb, I guess. And the comparison apparently did not make William Smith happy. He compared his own order to that of Gaspare Fossati, and then there comes the efforts of British ambassador Stratford Canning to raise that of Smith's Nishan, the order, to the level of Gaspare Fossati. So he openly, the British ambassador openly states that Gaspare Fossati was given, the Russian architect, Gaspare Fossati was given the 5th order, and William Smith should be given the 5th order as well, for this very reason. I think this is very telling, because it indicates, it shows us very explicitly the imperial promotion behind the two architects, right? And the level of competition, if you will, in 1840s in Pera, when the city was in a way rebuilt. This competition becomes so evident that we see it in the press of the time. The Galatasaray, the current high school, back then the medical school, was burned down totally in 1848, and it was going to be reconstructed, and that work was given to William Smith. And the repair works at Selimiye Barracks in Üsküdar, in the Asian sites, as well as a couple of other buildings were all handed to Naum Theatre as well in Pera, was given to William Smith, to the detriment of Monsieur Fossati, architect Russe. On this relationship, England prevails over Russia, it says. The drama is high, right? Yeah. So apparently there is a change of course in the 1847, 48, 49. But when we contextualize it, right, with the broader context, we see a couple of interesting things. For example, a political crisis between Russia and the Ottoman Empire. In 1847, the 1847 revolutions take place in the Hungarian-speaking parts of Habsburg Empire as well, and the Habsburgs called for the help of the Russian Empire. That responds by sending 200,000 soldiers to suppress the Hungarian revolt. And the thousands of Hungarian refugees, political refugees, came here to the Ottoman Empire, take refuge here, which causes a big political crisis between Russia and the Ottoman Empire. And England and France back the Ottoman hospitality to the Hungarian political refugees as the crisis kind of mounts, right? So my point, my conclusion is that we have now many monographs on the architects that built this city together, but in competitive ways as well. But we still need some interconnected approaches and some, like the way they were interacted, the way they were juxtaposed, the way they competed. Such broad histories kind of are still lacking. And this fierce competition in some ways between Gaspare Fossati and William James Smith, the two major, most prominent foreign architects of the city in the 1840s, are a prime example, if you will, of this situation. Thank you so much, and hope to see you.
Thank you, Mert. We concluded this session, so I'll invite all the speakers to the floor so that we can have a discussion. We looked into the social history and more personal matters regarding Fossati. You are the guest of honor. So thank you again for your presentations. By listening to consecutive presentations, I started to think about the period, what those sketchbooks are telling us, etc. And I immediately thought of the city of Imola and Da Vinci's drawing. It's the prime example of how we started to conceptualize the built world around us and to transmit it to paper, and how this process is in fact building up the person as well as the environment. So I just want to open up this question to all of you, including yourself. When I look at this sketchbooks, I see that this is a collection, way of collection for Fossati. Same for many architects, this is true for Aldo Rossi as well. But we see this images or experiences learned from, let's say, excavations from Herculaneum and Pompeii, etc., coming up in his later work. So all these build-up period emerges later in life. So if you would like to comment on this.
I completely agree. I think every architect is constructing his visual archives by seeing things. And in the period when Fossati was a young architect and finished his studies, he had to see and study classic architecture, and the most easiest way was to go to Rome. So let's say I am quite curious to understand more about his Greek notions. We have seen in the presentation about his works in St. Petersburg that he is quoting the Parthenon, and so he had also maybe things he had not seen but directly, but from books, of course, and from etchings circulating in this period. So the musée imaginaire of every architect is built by direct experience on one side and book experience on the other.
And it's also interesting how Lucia identified her presentation. The theme of traveling is so prominent in these very big architects. I should also mention, for example, Mimar Sinan has several campaigns, competitions made into distant lands, and he has collected images, visuals, and this collection is helping those big architects to produce wonderful works at the end. And this period is also very interesting. When I think of it, Vieux-le-Duc is present in the same time. The discussions are quite active, how to preserve, what to preserve, the restoration techniques, etc. And I also see in Fossati developing a consciousness for this, what is authentic and what kind of values we look in ancient remains, which can be carried into the future. So maybe from this broad perspective of that era, you may want to say something.
Still me? Yes, okay.
If you want, I guess.
Yes, okay. Let's say, I think that seeing early Christian basilica burning was also a hard experience, and to see that the project of repristinate or to save some parts of this early Christian, the last big early Christian basilica in Rome, and following the debate, that this experience was some kind in his mind. Also when he started then working in the Hagia Sophia. So I think the presentation of this afternoon is bringing us back to this topic of how much redesign or repaint and how much to save and conserve really the materiality of the original substance of the work of art. And this topic, he seems to be really avant-garde, some kind of very sensible. And maybe this was also from the discussions about San Paolo fuori le mura, shall we save the triumphal arch with these mosaics of the early 5th century, so earlier than Ravenna, San Vitale, just to understand, or shall we just take it down and renew it and put a copy up there? So what happened effectively in Rome. So I think this is the backpack of experiences he's bringing then also then to Istanbul when he's confronted this heritage here.
In that sense, we are only left with buildings now to read what the architect is thinking or what he has thought about, but the personal letters and archival material open up different windows to our perception. So if in the archives, are we able to find letters explaining this exchange with the person who is commissioning the work and the relationship with other architects, let's say, because this makes a comprehensive understanding possible.
Well, until now we didn't find so many letters, so it's still... So we are really taking it out from the drawings at the moment, what we think that we know about him, but maybe we are going to, in private collections, in the Fossati, Poma, descendants, maybe you have something in...
Yeah, because he's an architect, not a writer, so it's impossible to have something about the writer. It's a joke.
Yes,
because I don't know
sure.
what I say, because he's my grandfather, 3-4 times, and I appreciate the power of each of you. Well, thank you. I have just one paint of Fossati in my house, but it's mine, and the story is...
Take good care of it.
Yes, of course, until now, yes, but it's strange. You start in Morcote, and you see it's a small country, and then you finish your career in Istanbul, and you put everything you see in your career, Italy, Russia, in your work, and a very nice work you do, because you recreate the life of one man who start in a small country with no possibilities, because Morcote is, please visit it, yes, but it's a small one, and wow, it's a great thing. We are now talking about Fossati and his work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was looking at the images. I have a special question for you. It's coming, but let's finish this one. I was looking at the Russian example, the theater images, and what I noticed was that the decoration in the theater is exactly the same on our doors, the panels. I will take some questions. So this would be an interesting correlation to see how he carries the decorations and images with him wherever he goes. So it was a good surprise. And coming back to the Ottoman archives, does it have more to reveal? What are the...
Well, the documentation is mainly on the contracts of Gaspare Fossati, right? There is a big contract of Darülfünun, the Ottoman University. The point is, as I tried to show, there's a big interplay, right, between the Russian Empire, the British Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and the possibility is that we can try to rely more on the multi-archival, multilingual research. For example, there's the Stratford Canning here, the legendary British ambassador, who wrote extensively about his days and his activities, and yeah, maybe some more multilingual and multi-archival research should be needed. The Ottoman archives is mainly like that, yeah.
So let's give the microphone to the gentleman. It was planned like this. But the floor is open. You can ask your questions if you have one. And
yes, thank you very much. It's not really a question, it's more a hint for Mert Bey, and with regard to the question of the Ottoman archive, since you have access. I'm talking now about Giuseppe, the youngest brother. He was more or less in the same age like the Sultan at that time, so from what I was reading, I understood that he was the one having good relations with the Sultan and with the palace, with the Grand Vizier and the Rashid Pasha, etc. So, and there is a friend, an Italian friend of Giuseppe. He was a medical doctor. He was exiled for some years in Istanbul at that time because north of Italy was occupied by Austria. Anyway, when he went back to Italy, and after Giuseppe passed away in 1891, this Italian friend of Giuseppe published a booklet in the 1890s, and was to commemorate his good friend Giuseppe. So it's a small booklet dedicated to Giuseppe Fossati. And this booklet, he was writing what, according to him, Giuseppe was telling him about the renovation of the Hagia Sophia. And the point is the following. Giuseppe was telling to this Italian friend that at that time, excuse me, my Turkish, the Sheikh al-Islam, the Grand Mufti, had passed away. And he had left a huge fortune, an important fortune as an heritage. And most of this fortune, this heritage, was, of course, entering it was going to the empire. And Giuseppe was there in the palace of the Grand Vizier the day when part of this fortune was brought to the palace. He was there, he was witnessing this huge fortune, and he was the one, according to the story, that launched the idea, why not to use part of this fortune to renovate the Hagia Sophia. And this attitude reminded me to Paolo, your grandfather, because this is how we develop things. So, and according to this Italian friend who wrote a book in the 1890s, the Grand Vizier asked Giuseppe Fossati, yes, please write a report about just a summary, what do you want to do? And Giuseppe, together with Gaspare, who was the architect, they wrote a short report. This report was given by the Grand Vizier to the Sultan, and the Sultan approved, and there was this famous decree. So I don't know if this is the real story. Sorry? Yes, yes. So that the idea of renovating the Hagia Sophia came from Giuseppe Fossati, who was in the palace of the Grand Vizier when the heritage of the Sheikh al-Islam was brought to the palace, and sowing this huge fortune, he launched this idea. So I don't have access to the archive to research this, but maybe you have some work for the next years to explore and tell us if this is true or not. Thank you very much.
Eyewitness is also very important. So let's end the morning session for now, and we can, yes.
One short question I have.
Yes, please.
The French document you showed us said that, well, we know Fossati brothers, they don't have a Russian passport, do they? What? But because that document stated that they were Russian. Fossati was Russian, and that by giving this new contract to an English architect, so England had the upper hand over Russia. It stated something like that. Was it like was like Istanbul a domain where this kind of upper hand stories for having this or that contract in those years had political impacts on imperial wars between big countries, you think? And why was he stated Russian?
To start with your the last point, I tried to explain that the political crisis, for example, right, between Russia and the Ottoman Empire in 1848-49, before the Holy Places dispute that paved the way for the Crimean War in 53. Before that, before the big dispute, in 1848-49, there was a big political crisis, and the Russian ambassador Titov gave an ultimatum for war, for the deportation of the Hungarian political refugees from the Ottoman Empire back to Russia and the Habsburg Empire. So things were really tense. And my hypothesis is that, maybe some further research is definitely needed, is that, yeah, the political situation has a big impact on the contracts, on the clauses, even though the Ottomans seem to be very, very favorable to Gaspare Fossati and his works and etc. Mustafa Reşit Pasha, he's an Anglophone, right? But he gave the task of the building of construction of his own mansion on the Bosphorus to Gaspare Fossati, not to William Smith, in 1847. So yeah, that's definitely one thing, and more and more research should be needed on the various aspects of this. The first one was. Why
was he said to be Russian?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question as well. Please, let's.
At that time, the concept of passport was a different one. Passport means you have this document to pass through a port, so to travel. And I know that at some point, since they were coming from Russia, so they came through Odessa, and at some point they were issued travel documents, so passaporto, by the Russian. So at some point they were traveling to the Ottoman Empire and from the Ottoman Empire using documents issued by the embassy of Russia, but they were not Russian citizens, so it was a different concept. So this might generate some confusion. Anyway, thank you very much to the Russian colleagues to help them traveling.
Paolo has something to say, but I'm also curious about Mustafa Reşit Pasha, so in the break we should speak about Mustafa Reşit Pasha as well.
No, I just had a note on this question of national identity. In the local press in French, Fossati is described, what I found, as Italian, as Swiss, and as Russian, depending on situations, tensions, on how he's. It's always contextual. I think Pera has the social and cultural environment of Pera has a lot to do. It's not really so important, the passport, but who you are affiliated to, who you're working for. And it's interesting that in this context, France does not very much appear yet. It will be very prominent a few years later, but here we are with these three powers on the Ottoman. Yeah, that the German even later, but now it's in. Yeah.
So I found a document from Nantes, Archive Diplomatique, that stating Giuseppe and Virgilio are included in the document of Protégé Français. So this is a small note.
Another comment?
Actually, it's not directly related with this discussion, but I would like to say it to Ms. Daniela. I really like those human details in the drawings you highlighted. And I don't know if you checked his Sophia book. There are also many stories in the book. I mean, he has drawn people inside the building, around the building, and I think he's a storyteller as well, beyond his architectural skill. Thank you.
So thank you, Göksun. With this word, let's conclude the morning session. I thank you all for your participation, and we'll move to lunch. Thank you.